Hello, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us. I'm Lynn Doyle, and here's what I want you to think about this hour. How will President Bush be judged not just by presidential historians, but by citizens like yourselves? Will it be harshly, or will time heal some of the wounds the nation has suffered under his leadership? I want to know what you think, so you can email me anytime at tcn_iyc@cable.comcast.com. Consider this, though, before writing me. President Bush's administration was strained right from the very start because of just how close the results of that 2000 election were. Some people refused to accept that he had beaten Al Gore and actually accused him of stealing the election. Others never regarded him as their so-called president. But then September 11th struck, and the nation and the world united behind Mr. Bush. His popularity soared, and his approval ratings set new standards. Even as he undertook the search for weapons of mass destruction, Americans stood behind him. But when that search proved to be without merit, his standing in America, and elsewhere for that matter, started to suffer. And it plummeted as the war in Iraq continued into his second term. The federal response to Hurricane Katrina was sharply criticized as well, and President Bush along with it. Although just last week, he defended it by pointing out that thousands of lives were saved. And as he leaves office, the nation is in the throes of one of the worst recessions in the last 80 years. Still, his supporters say America has remained safe from further terrorist attacks under his guidance, and that he will ultimately be remembered as a positive influence on our country. Let's see which of our panelists agree with that and who disagrees. Let me introduce them to you. Edward Terzansky is a well-known political commentator and a national security and foreign policy analyst. And Joe Watkins is a Republican political commentator who was a White House aide to the first President Bush. On the other side of the aisle, and on the issue, is Steve Askew, who is a Democratic analyst and strategist, and Tara Dowdell, who is the managing member of the Tara Dowdell Group and an Obama surrogate. Great to have everybody here with us. Thanks so much for joining us on It's Your Call. Joe, I want to turn to you right away. How harshly will history judge President Bush?
Well, you know, history is interesting because Harry Truman left office in 1953, January 53, with a very, very low approval rating, something in the low 20s, and so unpopular that nobody wanted to see him. When he went back to Missouri, he had no friends, no future, as it seemed, and yet and still, 20, 30 years later, he's seen as a hero, as a heroic figure in American history. George Bush, I think, will be much the same way. He may have a low approval rating right now, but I think he's destined to be looked upon, regarded very, very well by history.
Ed, do you think that Joe makes a good point, and that he, not only like Truman, like Richard Nixon, might be remembered differently by historians?
I think it's likely, because what tends to happen 5, 10 years after a presidency, there's always a reassessment. No one could be regarded this badly. I mean, that's the simple fact. George Bush has been the unfortunate recipient of a lot of attention that hasn't been good. One thing to keep in mind, events continue to unfold. If the security portions go well, or if subsequent presidents don't do as well, Bush's standing is going to rise.
Have you ever, in the years that you've been involved in politics, known an elected official to leave office with such a low approval rating?
No, unless they were going off in shackles. But in his case, Lynn, there are 3 points. It's about deception, it's about arrogance, it is about a deeper partisan divide in this country. And I think people are angry, they're frustrated generally, not only about the economy, but about the state of affairs in Washington. And this president came in with a lot of hope, actually, despite the closeness of that race with Al Gore, that he was going to be able to put those differences aside, partisan differences, and make things happen. And he did not. He failed.
Tara, was it like doomed for failure, though, for President Bush? Because from the very beginning, Steve mentioned that the country was divided. Some people said he was never their president. They never believed he won the election in 2000 to begin with.
But you know what? After 9/11, the American people came together and they gave President Bush a whole lot of support. The media supported him, even though he stood before the country and said we were entering and invading Iraq because of weapons of mass destruction, which we subsequently found out do not exist. So, I mean, I think he got a major pass. The media for years overlooked a lot of things that happened in his administration. I mean, Cheney shot someone in the face. I mean, let's be real here.
That's got nothing to do with George Bush's legacy, with all due respect. Let's keep this in mind, too. Right after 9/11, there's this fiction that's been born that George Bush had all of this support and he frittered it away. Pay attention to one thing. After 9/11, when we wound up catching certain terrorists, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, the man who planned 9/11,
that's right.
when the Congress was